I think I'm just going to turn this over to Chris Cowperthwaite, who put together DemocracyKit, and he will introduce and set up the whole 3 different people speaking.
I was just going to say, like, it is very, I must say, awkward having everybody way back there. Like, I thought that was a different group. So I don't know, like, do you guys want to come on? We've got tons of seats up here. Does anybody want to come join us up here? You're very far back there.
They're coming.
Okay.
They're coming.
Awesome. Well, maybe we'll give people a minute to just walk up here if you're done your dinner or whatever, want to join us. It's kind of lonely. Okay, we will get started. Is this the clicker? This is the clicker?
We have a clicker.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so we're super pumped about tonight's presentation. DemocracyKit started at Civic Tech the day before Trump was elected. And actually, no, the day of. We were having such a good night. We launched DemocracyKit, and then we all went out for drinks after, and the world changed. So it feels like a year and a bit later. It's wonderful to be here again and to have Li and Hema. And so I just want to sort of frame the conversation and observe a few things before we get started about the actual topic tonight, right? And so get rid of that. You know what? Just close that out. Okay, so yeah, in terms of why DemocracyKit got started in the first place, and people were motivated, basically, personally, but also with the people that were involved in the 2014 cycle, seeing all sorts of amazing candidates run for office, and this number, standing out, the 92% of incumbents win. It's really hard to unseat an incumbent, and there are not that many open seats on council. And so basically, the other motivation, certainly the incumbency advantage, is one of the pieces, leveling the playing field, making resources available to people running for office. The other piece of it, personally, having worked mostly on women's campaigns through my political kind of history or career, the observation that I don't think that many of us who identify as male can really understand what it is like to put your name forward and run for office. As a woman, there's really not anything else like it. There's no employer where you could be in a racist, sexist society that we live in. There's nobody to rein in the Twitter comments. There's nobody to change policies at the public level. We have to be changing society, but that's not something that's going to happen overnight, right? And so, in terms of civic tech, and if we want to see a city that reflects that has policies that are more progressive, that are more more open, I think we do need to get very serious about supporting women candidates in running for office. And so it's something that everybody in the room can do. All of us have our projects. It's wonderful. Like everybody that's working on DemocracyKit, we're encouraging them to go get involved on a campaign. You might want to consider getting involved on a campaign for a woman running for office in the next election. Not everybody's going to run for office, but everybody can get involved on a campaign. And so the numbers are stark. I'm happy to make this available. This is sort of the breakdown we looked at between 2001 and 2014. This is a sort of summary of the trend in Toronto, Calgary, Ottawa. We chose the 3 largest municipalities without political parties at the municipal level. because it wasn't comparing apples to apples. So Vancouver and Montreal being the two that are obviously missing on this, not missing on this, but in terms of council and Toronto, Calgary, Ottawa, it's pretty clear the trend holds. It's about 3/4 male to 25, a quarter female. And I know I'm going to hand it over to Li to talk more about that. If you want to learn about getting involved on a campaign, get involved with DemocracyKit. We're doing trainings, but also resources. Can learn how to develop the plans and the tactics, strategies, whatnot that you need to be successful on the campaign trail, and that's what we're doing with DemocracyKit. So I'll hand it over to Li, who I've had the pleasure of working with on a number of different capacities. Li, I'll pass to you, and then Women Win Toronto with Hema, Vyas is here as well, and we're so excited. I mean, really, the reason we launched DemocracyKit in the first place was to make it available to groups that are working with candidates, and Women Win Toronto has been an incredible partner in what the work they're doing in Toronto. Thanks, Li.
Thanks a lot, Chris. So thank you everyone who's come here tonight. It's really a pleasure to be able to share this evening with you and to talk to you about the gender gap. I mean, Thursday will be International Women's Day, and I've been very active throughout my lifetime, seeing what happens year after year after year. And it's interesting when Chris had showed his statistics about that we have almost 72% men and 20, like a quarter of women in politics, even on a civic level. So I'm just going to slide over here. So the three things that I really want to talk about tonight is about the current challenge. There still exists, and there's actually more to do. We like to say, oh, here's a day of celebration. What are we going to do? And we've done so much, but yet we've got so much further to go. And I'm going to talk about why there's a gap, as well as how you can help, what you can do if you really want to do something. So I appreciate the fact that we did a bit of an intro, and I wanted to take a moment here just to get a show of hands. How many people live in Toronto? Okay, I know we have someone who's from Fredericton, so big round for you. Thank you so much. So because we are in the city of Toronto, and because the majority of the participants who are here are based in Toronto, this conversation is really going to focus about municipal politics. I ran as the school board trustee here in just last year, in the city of in Toronto Centre. And so one of the things is the city of Toronto has 44 wards. And so 47. You can imagine, pardon me? 47. 47 wards now, as we have added it on. So one of the things I'll be highlighting is the gender diversity gap even in our own city council. So the challenge is, population-wise, women make up slightly over 50%. We also know that very recently, visible minorities are now the majority. So what does that mean? Shouldn't we actually be seeing more representation in council? Well, just as Chris had actually pointed out, we don't, we know that there's, in Toronto, we have about 32% of council is actually female. And so knowing that we have 32% of council as female, my next question is, how many people are minorities? And so, out of all of the seats that we have in the ward, only 11.4% of the council is a visible minority. I mean, this is an experience that I have personally, being a woman of color, being a gay woman of color, where I don't see myself reflected on many different platforms. And even though I stand before you as an Asian Chinese woman, my family comes from India. And so I bring with me a whole other set of lived experience where I'm like, oh, well, the experiences of different cultures are not necessarily represented at the table. I've worked I've worked in corporate, I've worked in not-for-profit, I've worked in government, both on a political side as well as the bureaucratic side. And so I've been at all of these tables, and just as Civic Tech brings together masterful minds from all of the different regions, the one thing I know is everybody's committed with good intentions to want to do something positive, to make a change. And yet, what's happening, right? So there's a challenge. And so I'm going to put this into graphics, right? So as you can see, you know, we've chosen pink for the women, blue for the men, and then I break it down into visible minorities, right? And if you just take a look at the graph, look at the map right there, what does it then look like when we break it down to a visible minority female? We have one woman that is that. Is that a surprise for anybody here? No, right? And I have to say, I have to give a shout out to Kristen Long-Tam because she has done an amazing job as a human being. And I think we really do need to have more women at the table, more diversity, more lived experience, because we know that when you have more diversity, more lived experience, and more women at the table, the conversation changes. One example that I can actually give you is that in the States, in Congress, when they reached a critical threshold of 20% women, they were actually able, you know, there was more collaborative work, there was less grandstanding, there was more like, okay, I see where you want to go, let's try and do this. They were actually able to pass 75% of the bills. That's amazing. And the difference of this is that because while the men represented the majority of the group, they had lost the ability to communicate and find a common ground, right? And so this is in a lot of the research material that I had been looking at and looking like, why is it that women are making a difference? Even on an anecdotal level, when I've sat on different boards, when I've sat at different decision-making tables, often being the only woman, often being the only woman of color with my lived experience, everybody wanted to make a positive difference. Everybody said, oh yeah, we need to do this to help the most vulnerable. We need to do this. And people had ideas of what that looked like. But they didn't have that lived experience of knowing what the front line looked like. So for instance, you know, consultations. Like, oh, let's make sure we have everybody's voices at the table. We need to make sure, let's do one on education with families, for instance. And, you know, what's a great time? Okay, everybody works 9 to 5. So why don't we have it at 7 o'clock? Well, for a parent, 7 o'clock is the universal time of bedtime. And so that automatically wipes out a whole demographic of people who can't actually come and participate. It's happening on a weeknight, you know, they're not able to come out. Or if you have an event, is there going to be child minding services? What's available to support that? But then not everybody works 9 to 5. People work different shifts and different times. So how do we create a space where people can actually have their voices heard? And I'm putting that out as a question because I don't think we have all of the solutions. But it's what I have noticed on a very personal level. And all that we do, it's not who's at the table. I always ask myself, who's not at the table? So we know, I mean, we have the numbers. We know that there is something off with the representation that we have, and the gap exists. And the question is, why? So I've hinted a little bit about that, right? Just on a very anecdotal place. When it comes to the nuts and bolts of running for council, running on a municipal level, there's certainly a few issues that faces each person. So we have 47, times, 47 wards in which there could be up to 10, 12, 15 people who are vying for that. And if you think about even following news, you can have, the streams that you're interested in, and you just pick that stream, and that's the information that's going to come your way. Your friends would probably be sharing similar ideas, similar values. And so you might not break out of that laneway, right? And the information that comes is very hard. The information that filters down has been filtered. So breaking through the noise, having your brand, like if you're an individual person running on municipal council, what makes you different from the other person? It's just another name. Whereas if you're running provincially or you're running federally, the brand's pretty clear. We've got 3 main parties, 4, right? So we know what the Liberals stand for. We know what the PC stand for. We know what the NDP stands for. We know what the Green stand for. So it's kind of like they've got a lot of airway. They've got journalists covering them on a national level. They've got journalists covering them on a provincial level. People are talking. How does someone on a municipal level break through that? And I think it's very, very hard. On top of it, you don't have this organization. You don't have the groups of people who are focused just on communications, just on policy development, just on fundraising. You, in essence, become that one person who's doing all of those things. And if you're fortunate enough to have a few friends who can commit time to you, then you're already ahead of the game. But those are kind of like the nuts and bolts of it, right? Because as if someone running municipally, you have to find those resources. And then I'll bring it back to know how that should look like. But then I bring it back to the safety net. So if you're going to say, I'm going to run for this ward here, I'm going to, we all have to eat, right? We either have mortgages or rents that we have to pay. We may have family or partners that we have to support. And who's going to foot the bill? Is someone going to say, you know what, we'll cover your salary? That's not a reality that I have personally experienced. It may be a reality of others. Maybe someone's got a great business that they can give over to someone to manage while they pursue a political career. So I bring forth the safety net, right? Because there's a lot of sacrifice that is never captured. People would say, oh yeah, you need someone who does comms, you need this, you need that. But when I look at it as a pie and you're one person, the time that you have to take off, the money you have to, when you're taking time off, it will inevitably mean that you don't have financial income coming in. If you don't have financial income coming in, compound that with the fact that you have to raise money to run your campaign. You have to raise money, you have to raise friends, and you have to raise your connection with every single person in your ward. And a ward is actually not that small. It's probably anywhere between 80 to 100,000 people. And of that 80 to 100,000 people, how many are coming out to vote? Especially on a municipal level, right? And so what does that take us back to? It takes us back to brand recognition, what information is readily available. And for the electorate, how are they making their decision, right? So it's pretty complex. There's the individual that has had the courage to step forward and say, I want to run and I want to make change. And then you have the community who is like, who should I vote for? What should I do? You and I all have busy lives. The fact that you have made time to come here is really amazing, and I'm very grateful for the fact that you have come here, but that took some work, right? There's probably 2 or 3 other things that you could be doing and you have a choice to do. So think about what one person who's running for council is faced with saying, okay, how do I get people's attention? How do you break through the noise of Facebook, Twitter, the news cycle? How do you make sure when you do break through that you're also delivering a message that is clear and concise? If you come from the field of, if you're not a natural communicator, you may not know how to do that effectively. So, in terms of when we were talking about the incumbency, there's been 4 elections, one coming up in 2018. But if we look back all the way to 2003, of 4 municipal election cycles, there have only been 10 incumbents who have been unseated. That's a pretty, for me, when I read that statistics, I knew it was hard, but it's super hard, right? And when we look at that, why? It's because the electorate, when they're have very little time to figure out who's the right person, what's the message, you go into the ballot, the poll, and you see a whole bunch of names. What's separating them? What's their value system? What are you voting for? So when there's an incumbent, you're like, okay, I haven't heard anything super horrible. I'll just vote for that person. Because the relationship is that with incumbency, you also have the experience. So no news is good news, right? So that's a very real thing that I would say is something that makes a big difference in terms of why it's so hard for new people who want to be a fresh face and a new voice to break through that. They have so many layers to break through. There's so much noise out there. And so, one of the things is, it's not even based on, some people will really take the time to look at people's voting records. Some people will be really focused on an issue like bike lanes and what a councillor has championed or not championed. But not everybody is like that. I always think, wow, do I live in a bubble? Because I'm surrounded by a lot of people who are quite active and quite engaged and wanting to make a difference. But out of the 100,000 people who live in the community, how many people are really digging down and really finding out what each candidate brings? And how do you know who's got more, who should be prioritized? Sometimes when I have gone into the poll and I see a list of 10, 15, I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know that many people were running. So that's a huge challenge, right? To break through all of these layers. So now I'm going to move into, the question of who's voting. I'm going to show you some data about it. And my question is always, who's voting, right? If we looked at the statistics earlier and we saw that only 11.7%, 12% of the people who are on council are people of color, and I think it was 37% were people of visible minorities background. Who's actually voting, right? Why? Why are they voting? Why not? Who looks like me? And I bring this back down to tribes, right? I bring this back down to unconscious bias. That we, think about the friends that you hang out with. What school did you go to? What are you interested in? You like going to the theater? You probably hang out with a lot of people who like to do that. You like to code? You probably hang out with a lot of coders. You like bikes? You want to advocate for bikes? You probably hang out with a lot of people who share those similar values. So if you think about that, how does that extend into your voting habit? And I'll give this example of the fact, think about it. How many people have experienced this? We sort of look someone, you immediately sum someone up and you judge them, right? You guys have already said, oh, who's she? Okay, and whether if you've seen my picture, whether if you've heard about what other people, impressions, what other people have said, oh yeah, I heard good things, I'll go check it out, right? And you've been influenced by something. And we can't always quite pinpoint what that influence is, but we all do it, and it's okay. We are always judging. But it's the difference between something that's an observation and something that we feel and what is a fact. But we often blur it, and then it all becomes I don't know. I loved it because they were on point with a policy issue that you believe in, or maybe something totally the opposite. I didn't like the way that they held themselves. I hear that very often. And so if we can have the courage to ask ourselves, why did I make that snap judgment, right? When people say, oh, first impressions are everything. What are the different things going on in our brains that is helping us form those decisions, right? So, when it comes to unconscious bias, think about the fact that the federal government has just put forth legislation for people who are submitting their resumes in, and it's called the name blind. So when you submit your resume in, why is it that someone who has a Muslim name is not, the exact same qualifications, is not getting interviews as frequently as someone with an Anglo name? And the statistics show that if you have a Muslim name, I think that it's about 63, you have to submit your resume 63% times more than someone with an Anglo name. If you have a Chinese name, then you have to submit it 68% times more. And if you have an Italian name, you've got to submit it 12% more, right? So think about what that looks like and how that breaks down, because it's something as simple as what school did you go to? It's as simple as your name, right? We're not even looking at the differentiators, because that in and of itself changes people's perception, right? Of whether you're in the in pile or the out pile. Anybody who's been in a business meeting, why is it that women seem to somehow always be the one that gets interrupted? Or why is it that you said an idea, you don't have to agree or out yourself here, but have there been times when you said an idea and it just kind of gets passed, and then a few minutes later, somebody else has the idea. And then everybody goes, oh yeah, that's a great idea, right? How many times has that happened to you? And I think also, why is it that if you're in a meeting and that person comes in, there's that one person that comes in late all the time, and what happens is they're like, oh, come on in, no problem, like, you're late. That's fine, just join in. But what makes it different between the other person that comes in the room and it's like, then they're made to feel guilty, then they're made to feel ashamed, right? So there is something that's happening. I don't have the concrete examples for it, but if I just ask you for a moment to reflect upon those times when you just kind of have that feeling like, that just didn't feel right, like, that's okay. Because I'll bet you're not alone in that. We just don't often verbalize it. But if we can at least have the courage to recognize the biases that we hold personally, maybe that'll just help us pause for a moment and kind of go, why am I making these decisions? And I'm a true believer that to effect change, we have to really start with ourselves. So here's some stats here, right? This is formulated with Stats Canada election and Election Ontario, that when we look at people who are non-visible minorities, 20 to 29 is the age, and 30 plus is also the age at the top. So people between 20 and 29 who are non-visible minorities vote 42% more times, right? Chinese people, 26%, and South Asians, 43%. But black people, the reason why this is just a dash is because they don't vote enough to even make the cut. And when we think about other issues like overrepresentation in our criminal justice system, we have to ask why. What are the systemic issues and challenges, and how's the system set up for who to fail and who to succeed? And it's something that I really want to turn our minds to just for a moment, to think, like, bring it back to when I said, like, think about who you hang out with and who you feel most comfortable with, right? Like the people that you have a shared experience with. Those are probably going to be the people that you will vote for. So if we think about people, you know, they say, oh yeah, let's get the ethnic vote, right? And then they'll put an ethnic person from that community because it's pretty lowbrow, but yeah, the Chinese person is going to vote for the Chinese people. It seems like a fairly blunt tool, but it's if you think about it, if a Chinese youth is going to go vote, that's only 26%. And what conversations are being had at home about go out, vote, your voice is heard? And those who are often marginalized will probably feel they don't have much say in what they do because they probably don't even feel that empowered in their day-to-day life. And so having that conversation, who's going to have that conversation with them? We all lead busy lives. Our teachers, who's going to be able to say, well, let's sit down and have it. What conversations are happening at dinner tables? I mean, I feel like I might be archaic because I actually sit down at the table with my family to have a dinner. Well, I've knocked on many doors, and when families open it up, they're on their couch with a plate on it watching TV. Or how many times have you gone to the restaurant and like you can have a whole family sitting there and they're all on their personal devices? Who's communicating to who, and what are they saying? And I'm really provoked by that because I'm concerned. I'm actually more concerned now than even like last year. So that's a part of why statistically why we have a gap. So we know that there's a problem, and we know that the research shows that there are issues with these, that there are issues that exist. And so as we head into the October 22nd municipal election, how can we resolve to fix the issue? Well, I put out the question about asking yourselves, what can I do? Asking, what can you bring to the table? What skills do you have? And I know you all have skills. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. I was a Civic Action Diversity Fellow for 2017, and CivicTech was actually a Civic Action Diversity Fellow project. And it's so amazing to see all these people, all of you come week after week, and it's obviously had such strong leadership from within, and even have Civic Tech in Fredericton is amazing, because we the people have the power, but do we the people recognize that? And if we are too busy, then we're not going to make change. And when we break down the we, I'm going to ask you, what are you doing? So I think from what I heard earlier about people who are here to pitch their ideas, to work on a project, giving up every Tuesday night to do this, I commend you. I think it's amazing. We need more people like you. And it's so amazing to see all of you here doing that. Now, I talked about how we often tend to hang out with people that we feel most comfortable with and in our own tribes. So I guess ask yourself this question next. What's your comfort zone? Because I really want you guys to break out of it. So what can you do? You can volunteer, you can advocate, you can speak up. It's simple things. I always think it's like incremental shift for monumental change, right? So if you are in a group meeting and your friend says an idea or your colleague says an idea and someone like interrupts them, speak up for that person. Just say, hold on, he or she didn't finish making a comment, you know, and give them back that space. We have to create that space. If you have an opportunity to be on the TTC, right, and you see something happen, like stand up, help that person. Like everybody's got their iPad, like their earbuds in or whatever. Like I'm not talking about like go out and save the world. I'm actually talking about the small things that you bear witness to every day that can make a difference for that person. And who knows what will happen once you kind of, you know, drop that pebble into the water. Ripple effects will happen. But it comes back to courage, right? And it comes back to breaking out of your comfort zone and expanding your base. So if I were to bring this back into the municipal elections, I know that there's some very, very, very smart people here, which is all of you guys, and you all have unique skills. And I heard you guys mention about what your interests were and whether you're a coder, whether you have organization skills, whether, you know, whatever it is that you have. Why don't you find someone to volunteer for? Why don't you find someone who totally doesn't look like you, but represents some values that you're interested in? Why don't you think about what women are out there who might need help? Or maybe I should volunteer for someone who is totally different and outside of my comfort zone, someone I would never think about. Because the moment we really break out of our silos, we're going to start breaking into a greater good and find our common ground. And so, I don't know if anybody has any questions, but I do want to turn that out to everyone. Because I think that the question of the now what can I, yeah, Chris?
Yeah, I was just saying we've got to get the breakouts, and maybe Hema could just introduce and then we could break it.
Yes, we're done. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. I think we've got time for maybe one or two questions. So did you want to say something?
Yes, I do want to say something, actually. I'm doing, I wanted, Lee's presentation was a great lead for what I wanted to say, actually. Right around now, all over the city, people are looking for city council candidates. People get asked to run for city council. Just before January in 2010, I put my hand up to say I was going to run for city council. I didn't ask. I started looking around. I started talking to fundraisers. I started talking to experts at City Hall. And they looked at me and thought, oh, and said, I don't know how you make sense as a candidate. Certainly wasn't my qualifications or my experience. I'm a researcher. I looked at what all the other councillors did before they got into council. And you know what? Every visible minority woman that I know who's run for council, they put their own hand up. Rowena Santos, Alejandra Bravo, Karen Sun, and we've all lost. It's really tough, as you can see from all the stats, to beat an incumbent. It's really tough as a woman to run for council when people don't see that many women on council. Or if there's one visible minority woman on council, because when we talk about unconscious biases, you don't make sense. It's rare to see that person. And in 2014, I supported 4 candidates, all visible minority women, and won. Kristen Wong-Tam kept her seat. I was very happy about that. So me and a couple friends went out for lunch right about this time last year. Melissa Wong, she works at City Hall. She is my co-chair. We launched Women Win Toronto. We decided we have to do things differently this year. So we did a call out for applications, asking women from diverse backgrounds who want to run for city council, and we asked them to join our program. And we have an amazing group of 15 women. We've been working together since September, talking about how to run for city council, how to fundraise, how to build a campaign team. Lee and Chris have both been there. Thank you very much for facilitating. And now is my ask. Our sessions are coming to an end, and the campaign period is starting in May. We have a call out for volunteers at Women Win Toronto because we need your help in organizing, in coordinating volunteers, in having events, in doing research. And so I would ask you to visit our website at womenwinto.ca. If you could fill out the volunteer form by March 11th, please, you'll receive an invitation. Just let us know how you want to work with us. And we'll invite you to our volunteer welcoming session on March 15th. Thank you so much. And I look forward to your questions and also in our Women in Politics breakout panel.
One or two quick questions, if there are none.
Better.
I'm interested in this fact that there are only 11 or so percent are visible minorities in Toronto. From the budget media perspective, I recently looked at the Census Canada stuff. And you're probably familiar with David Olshansky's work in terms of the 3 Torontos. My impression is, and correct me if I'm wrong, and my guess is that around the periphery of Toronto, in particular in certain other neighborhoods, the majority of visible minorities would be quite large, probably. And I'm wondering, and so in principle, I would suggest to me that would be great opportunities for people of color and so forth, diverse backgrounds, new immigrants, which would be so awesome to get into the council. Can you talk about that? Is that something that you're aware of? Is that an opportunity as far as what you're doing?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's a really good question. I would say a couple things to that. And we talked a little bit about, actually Lee spoke a little bit about how communities there are all sorts of different communities. There are all sorts of people that we relate to. We don't necessarily relate to people because they look like us. So in those, I know actually one of the questions I got was whether I'd move to Scarborough to run because there are a lot of people with South Asian background in Scarborough. But I didn't know anyone in Scarborough at the time. I don't know too many people out there. And I'm not sure that my background would necessarily be the choice of people who live there just because at a certain level we look alike.
But what about local leaders? I presume they would arise out of
there, and you know what, and that's a great point too. There are a lot of amazing organizers all over the city doing amazing work, and certainly from different backgrounds, from different communities. I would say a couple things. One is being asked, like I said, the organizers who run campaigns haven't changed too much, so they may go to their usual circles to look for candidates. And what I would also say is you have to see it yourself. And it is a struggle for me to see myself as a candidate. I didn't, when I ran, nobody looked like me. You know, I struggled to find people. One of the reasons we created Women Win Toronto is to create a community. So you see people who look, sound, and actually are experiencing that same thing. So there are a lot of reasons why I think you may not be seeing that.
I'm sure, I wish I could.
But it's a very good question, thank you.
And just very quickly on that point, one thing I did mention is that when it comes to women, they actually have to be asked more times than men Like they have to be asked over and over and over again, if they have the privilege of being asked to please run, please run, please run. We think you're the right person, and they will have more, you know, I don't know if it's dealt, but they probably have more complex considerations, especially if they have family. I mean, and I don't want to lay just on that. It's just, I'm coming from my perspective because I'm running in the provincial election, and those were part of the considerations that I had made with what am I giving up to do this, right? And there are real costs. It's not like people are like, oh yeah, like you're, I don't know, they have this vision that you're like sailing in the clouds or something, and it's nothing but grunt work. You know, it's a lot of work. Yeah. All right, is there time for one more question? Anything? Great. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That was great. And I think there will be an opportunity to continue this conversation in a breakout a little bit later, which we will be talking about in a second. But the first thing we're going to talk about is announcements. So announcements are news, job offerings, stuff that's going on in the community that she would like to share with the folks here. We ask you to keep it brief, 30 seconds or less. And if you have one, please come up here, or if you want to stand up.
Just quickly, I'm tasked with Debbie's support tonight, and one of the things we have to do after the evening is over is fold these folding chairs and stack them. So if everybody were to fold their folding chairs, and for extra bonus points, stack them on that cart back there, it would be very much appreciated.
I just want to share some news. So I'm a teacher and tech experience designer for a girls' school here in Toronto, Branson Hall. And for the past 2 weeks, we've been working on a civic tech kind of hackathon with the grade 9 students. So last week we went to San Francisco, and then this week it's a 4-week-long hackathon. And we've been using the open data portal for coming up with issues, and the kids have been loving it. They can make the solutions around inequality, energy, environment, transportation, and health. So thank you for the open data.
Samara Canada is hosting a thing called the Wonk Prom, which is a party at the Public Policy Forum. It's on Thursday, April 12th, 8:30 p.m. We have a discount code that anybody in the room can use. The Open Democracy Project, and so if you can sign up at go to samaracanada.com, and it's open_wonk is the code, which is a hilarious code, but there you go.
Hello, my name is Alex.